Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Winchester Mystery House, why a grieving widow built a never-ending mansion. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. For 38 years, the hammers never stopped. From 1884 until the morning she died in September 1922, Sarah Winchester kept 20 or more carpenters working around the clock on a Victorian mansion in San Jose, California. When construction finally ceased at her death, the house had grown to 160 rooms. It had stairs that ended in ceilings, doors that opened onto sheer drops, and windows that looked into interior walls. It was, by any measure, one of the strangest buildings ever constructed. The tour guides who descended on the property after her death had a ready explanation. Sarah Winchester was haunted by the ghosts of those killed by the Winchester repeating rifle her late husband's company had manufactured, the gun that won the West, as the advertisement said, and killed an unknowable number of people doing it. The spirits demanded she build forever. It was a good story. It was almost certainly false. The real explanation for what Sarah Winchester built and why is more interesting and more human than any ghost story. What was she actually doing? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the world of history's most enduring unsolved crimes, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Every unsolved crime is a failure, not just of the investigation, but of memory itself. The witness, who might have placed the suspect at the scene, has died. The physical evidence has degraded or been lost in a storage room. The lead detective retired 30 years ago. The files exist, but the institutional knowledge that made them legible is gone. Cold cases are, in a very literal sense, history events that have receded from the living present into the documentary past, accessible now only through records, artifacts, and the unreliable memories of survivors. And yet cold cases do get solved. The history of forensic science is partly a history of cold case resolution. Cases that sat dormant for decades until a new technology, DNA profiling, digital facial recognition, isotope ratio analysis, genealogical databases, provided the key that previous generations lacked. The Golden State Killer was identified 50 years after his first known crime by genealogical DNA matching. Multiple historic murders have been solved through mitochondrial DNA extracted from hair samples thought to be too old and degraded to yield any useful information. The past is not as sealed as it seems. What cold cases teach us about crime is often as important as solving them. They expose the limitations of investigative practice at their time, the tunnel vision that focused on the wrong suspect, the forensic contamination that destroyed evidence, the jurisdictional rivalry that prevented agencies from sharing information. Examining cold cases is an act of institutional self-examination, an attempt to learn, across decades, from the failures that allowed the perpetrator to walk free. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the Winchester Mystery House, Why a grieving widow built a never-ending mansion is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Sarah Winchester was born Sarah Pardee in 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut. She married William Wirt Winchester, son of the founder of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. In 1862, their only child, Annie Pardee Winchester, died of marasmus 6 weeks after birth in 1866. William Winchester died of pulmonary tuberculosis in 1881. Sarah inherited approximately $20 million, equivalent to roughly $600 million today, and a 50% stake in the Winchester Company. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered construction on the San Jose property began in 1884. Sarah purchased an 8-room farmhouse and immediately began expanding it, employing between 13 and 20 servants and more than 20 craftsmen continuously. The work continued for 38 years without pause, including nights and weekends. When Sarah Winchester died on September 5, 1922, construction stopped the same morning. Carpenters reportedly left nails half-driven in walls. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this. And that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The finished, or rather, abandoned, mansion contains 160 rooms across 4 stories, including 40 bedrooms, 2 ballrooms, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 windows, and 166 doors. Many of the reportedly mysterious features have mundane explanations. The famous staircase with 7 turns and 44 steps that rises only 2.7 meters was designed to accommodate Sarah's severe arthritis. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the seance room, a small windowless chamber near the center of the house, has been central to the haunted legend. Victorian seance rooms were common in upper-class American homes of the era. Spiritualism was a mainstream cultural phenomenon in the late 19th century. The room's existence no more proves Winchester communicated with the dead than a Victorian parlor organ proves she was a concert musician. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake caused significant structural damage. Several rooms were permanently sealed after the earthquake shifted the building, creating some of the doors opening onto drops and the blocked passages that would later fuel the haunted narrative. These features are post-earthquake damage, not deliberate design elements intended to confuse spirits or anything else. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Winchester employed 13 to 18 full-time servants and consistently paid her craftsmen above market wages. She was known as a generous and practical employer. Her correspondence with architects and contractors reveals pragmatic concerns about construction quality, material costs, and building codes, not the language of someone building to appease supernatural entities. She was, by available evidence, a rational and competent manager of a very large construction project. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological errors. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Winchester Mystery House, why a grieving widow built a never-ending mansion. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation, proposed by researchers, holds that Winchester built continuously to confuse or appease the evil spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles. The popular legend, actively promoted by tour operators from the 1920s onward. Under this theory, a medium told her she would live only as long as construction continued. No contemporary documentation supports this claim. The earliest sources for the spirit story postdate Winchester's death and originate with commercial tour operators who had strong financial incentives to promote a haunting narrative. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Winchester built continuously as a creative outlet and a means of processing grief, the psychological interpretation favored by most serious historians of the site. She lost her infant daughter in 1866 and her husband in 1881, and channeled the resulting trauma and her enormous inherited wealth into an obsessive building project that gave her life purpose and structure. The objection is that this interpretation, while plausible, rests on inferred motive rather than documented statement. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the unusual features of the house are the unplanned result of 38 years of continuous expansion without a master architectural plan, the most straightforward explanation, favored by architectural historians. When a Victorian farmhouse is expanded ad hoc over 4 decades by successive waves of craftsmen responding to an owner's immediate wishes, stairs to nowhere and misaligned doors are predictable outcomes of incremental construction, not evidence of supernatural motivation. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Winchester Mystery House, Why a grieving widow built a never-ending mansion does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes no contemporary documentation, no letters, diary entries, interviews, or accounts from people who knew her, records Winchester expressing a belief that she was haunted or that she needed to build to protect herself from spirits. The seance room, the most cited evidence for the supernatural theory, was a standard feature of Victorian upper-class homes with no particular association with ghost communication in that era. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented architectural analysis of the seemingly mysterious features consistently yields mundane explanations. The shallow riser staircases are arthritis accommodations. The sealed rooms were created by earthquake damage. The interior windows allowed Sarah to monitor staff from her rooms. And the overall spatial confusion results from incremental Victorian construction without an overarching blueprint, rather than deliberate labor. In line design, this evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the grief hypothesis is supported by biographical pattern. Winchester lost her only child in 1866, lost her husband in 1881. Inherited vast wealth she had no need to spend, and began construction 3 years after her husband's death. The construction employed dozens of craftsmen and gave her household an enormous institutional purpose. The obsessive building pattern matches documented grief responses in other wealthy Victorian widows who channeled loss into philanthropic or architectural projects. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Winchester Mystery House, why a grieving widow built a never-ending mansion. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Winchester Mystery House is a California historical landmark and a major tourist attraction in San Jose, drawing over 100,000 visitors annually. The haunted reputation was constructed almost entirely by commercial tour operators after Sarah's death and bears little relationship to documented historical fact. A 2018 horror film titled Winchester dramatized the haunting legend with Helen Mirren. Serious architectural and historical analysis has provided mundane explanations for most of the building's odd features. What remains is genuinely remarkable: a Victorian mansion of extraordinary scale and idiosyncrasy, built by a grieving woman with nearly unlimited resources and 38 years to spend. Whatever Sarah Winchester was doing, she was doing it on her own terms. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Winchester Mystery House, why a grieving widow built a never-ending mansion from the historical record, through physical evidence across the competing theories and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Winchester Mystery House ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.